This is a true story. One time I was at a Chinese food place and I got a fortune cookie that says, "You are smart, for you do things smartly." No joke, folks. That's a real story, true fortune cookie that I have received. So the smart blur effect is smart for it does things smartly. Namely, that it keeps edges crisp while it blurs other areas. So basically, let's apply smart blur to this effect. Now, I want you to notice before I apply this here, the layer I'm going to apply this to is basically a pre-composition that consists of the logo and the cathedral on one layer. If we were to apply something like fast blur to this, for example, and we were to blur this, everything would be blurred, right? Okay, so I'm going to delete fast blur and apply smart blur. It's kind of hard to see the difference right off the bat, but this is blurred. But it's attempting to keep the edges crisp and clear. So if I take the radius, the blur radius up to, 35, something ridiculous like that, you can see that these areas are starting to be soft in here where there was detail, but where there's edges, those are preserved. So there's still tons of detail in the stained glass, and the edges of the stained glass are razor sharp, but the stuff outside where there wasn't that much detail has all been blurred out. And of course, our vector graphic here on top has no sign of any type of harm whatsoever. Now I'm just going to skip ahead to these modes real quick and get this out of the way. There's like edge only, which makes this black and white render, and also overlay edge. Kind of cool in and of themselves, but not really what I'm looking for when I'm creating a blur. But just to get an idea of what the edges are looking like. Those are kind of like more like utilitarian modes than like final output modes. Now we can change the threshold as well. If we take this up to say 100, then that's basically going to give After Effects more permission to blur more stuff. Basically, the edges are going to have to be a lot harder for it to not blur it. So there's a strong contrast from this stained glass window to the area around it, the part of the wall around it. And so that is preserved. Even with such a high threshold, that is preserved. The opposite is also true. If I took the threshold down to 5, then basically we would preserve a lot of detail here. So moral of the story is that smart blur is smart, for it does things smartly. It basically looks and tries to find edges in the footage, and it will not blur those edges. It will keep those sharp and just blur the area within the edges. So this is great, for example, too, not only with just vector graphics, but if you had, let's say, somebody's face, and let's say you had my face, for example, and so you might want to keep the edges of my face crisp, but get rid of some of the ickies on my face by using smart blur. Also, there might be a time when you have a shot that's maybe a little bit noisy, but you still want to preserve some edge detail. Again, smart blur can be a great choice for those situations as well. I know there's literally hundreds of effects in this training series, but smart blur is one of those ones you want to kind of tuck in the back of your brain so that you can call it forth when needed for a future situation. It definitely does come in handy.